So do you need expensive reels to catch bass? One of the themes we've been exploring this year is saving some money and being practical about our tackle purchases. And today we're going to talk about a brand that I think has improved a lot, and you've seen me feature on the channel here sporadically, and that is KastKing. What exactly is going on with KastKing in 2026? Kestrel Air. I haven't used this as... Oh my gosh. So we just got a new reel here in the workshop, and that is the KastKing Megajaws Elite combo. And we're going to talk about it a little bit because you guys have seen me using their flagship reel, which is the KastKing MGTI. I have caught a ton of fish on this reel and I really like it. But a lot of people have talked about the price being a little bit too high end for that. So we're going to talk about a couple KastKing reels and my thoughts on the brand, because they've made a lot of changes towards a different direction here in the past couple years, I think, for the better. And as somebody who has primarily used a lot of the high-end stuff like Shimano, Daiwa, I want to kind of compare it to KastKing and walk through some of the things that I think actually make KastKing a really attractive brand if you're trying to save some money in 2026. So I definitely feel like today's video will be a little bit, we'll get some mixed opinions on this. Let's just say that, because KastKing as a rule has been sort of a brand that's been evolving. So they've actually been around a long time. They started, oh goodness, like over 10 years ago. I mean, the first KastKing reel I ever tried was a KastKing Speed Demon. It was like the 10 1-to-1. It was like the OG one. I've actually got one of the OG, I think this is the Spartacus one, which was one of their original reels as well. And I've tried all sorts of different KastKing reels. And it's a question I get a lot because in some of the videos I've done this winter, especially in the fall, you've seen me using this, which is the MGTI. This is their flagship reel. This is a expensive reel. It's like over $300 for this reel, but it's a very premium reel. I think that this is on par with some of the other brands' premium reels. So if you've been watching my videos, you know that I've been using this MGTI quite a bit. I got a lot of comments about this reel because it is a KastKing reel that is expensive. This reel is over $300. Got a titanium spool. It weighs next to nothing, around 5.5 ounces. Super light, cast really well, clicking drag star, clicking drag brake, premium handle. It's their big, expensive reel. When I mentioned this reel in some videos, some people were like, oh, well, there's other KastKing reels that I think you should try that make a little bit more sense. KastKing has always had that budget reel stigma, I guess. And when you see something like this, a lot of people are like, I'm not gonna spend that much money on a premium reel. I'm gonna go out and buy like a Corrado and stuff like that. So I actually just picked up this. This is one of their new mid-range reels, I'll say. This is the Megajaws Elite. Now I've actually tried the Megajaws proper, which if you're not familiar with that, was like an $80 reel. A lot of you guys, when I did some of the budget reels videos, especially when I covered this one, which is the Skeet Reese reel, which I think for the price, the Skeet Reese reel is actually really good. I caught one of my biggest largemouth this year on this reel. I fished it quite a bit. It is a little bit heavier than something like the Spartacus or obviously the MGTI, but it's under $100. So it's much more of a budget-friendly reel. Whereas, you know, these two we're going to talk about today are a little bit on the higher end. So the Megajaws Elite, let's talk about this. I thought it was like a good middle ground. It was a reel that wasn't quite as expensive as the MGTI, had a lot of the same similar, you know, pros and cons. And honestly, look at that. That's actually pretty dope. I kind of like the mouth on it. That's, I guess, the Megajaws. So this reel retails for $139.99, and it's actually on special right now, and that's why I picked it up. It's actually on sale. Some of the links in the description will take you to a sale page where you can get this for, I think it's like 10% off. So it's actually a pretty good deal right now with all the codes stacking and stuff. And I was impressed with this reel. So I own two of these now. Now what drew me to the Megajaws Elite was that a lot of the criticisms that I got from the MGTI videos was that it was too expensive. The MGTI is a fantastic reel. It is super premium. It's on par with some of the Daiwa and Shimano reels of the same price point. But a lot of people may not want to take the plunge into a reel like this with KastKing because it is so expensive. So that's where this reel came in. And I've been all about exploring budget options this year because I've talked about a ton of high-end combos and reels this year. But I've also talked about some budget stuff like the Skeet Reese reel, and I always pride myself on trying to find sort of the top, the bottom, the middle, and saying like, hey, here's all the good stuff within all the ecosystem of price points, because not everybody wants to spend a ton of money, but some people do want the high-end stuff. I'm kind of an interesting person in the sense that I like a little bit of everything. So that's what drew me to this reel, because I think it's a good middle ground. But what's crazy about the Megajaws Elite to me is it has such a light spool. A lot of times with cheaper reels, the spool is kind of where you see them kind of skimp. So this is a super light spool, and it's got the magnetic braking on the side. So the components of this reel are actually really good for the price. So at $139, you're definitely starting to move into the more premium side of KastKing. So if you listen, you know, it's got a plastic drag star versus the MGTI, which is almost over double the price, has the metal drag star. So that's kind of where you're seeing some of the changes, but it's also got a clicking brake. But one cool thing about this that actually surprised me was that if you remember from like the 90s, the flipping switch and like the early 2000s, flipping switches were really popular. I loved these. I actually really loved flipping switches. And when I was looking through their catalog, I was like, wow, this Megajaws Elite actually has a flipping switch on it. So that's something you don't see a lot of reel brands doing these days. So I thought that was kind of cool. It is useful if you like to flip brush or punch and stuff like that. And I used to use it a ton when I was fishing, especially from the bank, which is kind of weird to think about, but like when I would be pitching around wood from the bank when I was younger, I always used the flipping switch. In fact, just to show you guys, this is an ancient quantum reel. So it almost feels like a freaking brick compared to this one, but this is a quantum accurate, but this also has a flipping switch on it. So this is a reel from like, I think 2008 is when this reel came out, and it's got a flipping switch. While it may not be for everybody, I actually find this kind of nice because it gives you the option to use it if you want to. So I think for the price, this actually is a good middle ground reel if you're maybe not ready to step into something like the MGTI. And not to mention, I also got a rod with it. So I've talked to a lot of people about KastKing rods, and this is the Royale Legend Pro. Now you guys know that I've enjoyed using the Kestrel rod, but I've used a few other KastKing rods I wasn't a huge fan of, but I'm actually starting to really like 2-piece, 3-piece rods. And there's a couple of reasons for that. As a rod snob, I obviously would prefer a 1-piece rod. They're just a little bit more sensitive. But the technology in a lot of these rods are starting to really get so good that you almost can't even tell with travel rods. Like the Triza Aiello Megajaws rod, super great rod, super sensitive. I've got it in 3 different actions now, and they're 3-piece rods. That Kestrel rod, the KastKing Kestrel rod, super great rod. It's actually kind of sensitive considering that it's, you know, a budget BFS rod. It's also a 3-piece rod. So I was wanting to get a rod to go with this. So, and I got recommended this particular series from a friend, and I was initially going to get the 1-piece version of this rod, but I decided to get the 2-piece version of the rod. And while there's definitely like a lot of things about it that are going to, you know, where they kind of cut corners to save costs, like it's got the plastic reel seat right there, you can see. So you're not getting like cork, you're not getting any high-end components that you might get on some other rods, but it was also only 99 bucks for this rod. Considering that it is an IM7 blank, I actually thought this was a decent deal. So that's the combo I went with, the KastKing Royale Legend Pro with the Megajaws Elite. And I definitely think it's a step up from the original Megajaws, because the original Megajaws, while it was a good reel, it was a little bit on the cheaper end. It was like a $70 reel, whereas this one, they definitely stepped it up with the components because you're getting, you know, more quality across the board. So I'm impressed with KastKing's gravitation towards quality, because I think when you see like things like this Skeet Reese reel, I was a little skeptical on this reel at first when I picked it up. I had a lot of people recommend it to me. I saw it at iCast and I was like, okay, well, I'll try that one because I wanted to make a video on it. Because one of the things I've been trying to do is just look at different brands. Because, you know, I have a ton of Shimano reels, which they're great, but it's always nice to look at different brands. And some of the things I think KastKing has been doing is very ambitious in a good way, because, you know, you see them with the technology in the MGTI, you see them doing reels that are actually quality around $100. But they haven't lost their way. And if you're not someone who cares that much about reel quality, like you're just wanting to go out there and get a reel that's going to last a couple of years and you only have to spend like 50 bucks, you know, there's reels like this Spartacus, which, you know, for the price, I was actually really surprised how well this casts. Now, it doesn't have the best spool on the Spartacus, and you can definitely tell there's like some corners cut just because like it is a cheaper reel. But for the price, I mean, I was impressed by that. But performance-wise, if you're looking for KastKing's middle ground, the Megajaws Elite, I think actually might fill the void a lot of people are looking for, where this is a reel that will last you a little bit longer than maybe some of these more budget-centric things without having to drop the coin on something like the MGTI. So there's kind of my piece on KastKing as a company. I've got a lot of inquiries about that. Like obviously I've used that Kestrel BFS a ton and I've got a lot of fish on that and I really enjoy that reel. But I've gotten a ton of questions throughout the past couple of videos about KastKing as a company. And I think while they're definitely evolving, I'll just say that much. There's some options out there that are really strong. You know, you've got your budget on one end, and then you've got your middle to upper of the pack, and they're vastly different. You can see that the Megajaws Elite and the MGTI are on one sort of pillar here, and then things like the Skeet Reese reel, the Spartacus, I think there's the Royale Legend reel. They kind of fill this other cylinder where it's more budget friendly to upper budget to almost hitting that middle of the pack. So I think one thing KastKing is doing a lot better now as a company is that they're very defined in those pillars where it's like budget, middle, top end. And they're starting to kind of consolidate SKUs a little bit, which I think confused a lot of people in the beginning because they mostly just had like 10 different budget reels and you couldn't really tell what was what. But now I think reels like the Megajaws Elite, the MGTI, filled the void for someone who wants to spend a little bit more on a nicer reel, but maybe not a ton more. And then you still got the budget ones that people were known for, because I know a ton of people who just fish with these reels. So that's kind of my piece on KastKing. Let me know what you guys think. I personally think their quality has improved tenfold in the last just 2 years alone. I think they've come out some really good stuff. And especially because of how accessible a lot of their reels are and just, you know, out of the box, ready to go. They cast super well. That's one thing that I've always joked about is KastKing reels being good at casting. You know, they kind of live up there to their name. They're kind of no nonsense, but you know, the tolerances on them are a little bit more wonky than say something like a Corrado, which I think is probably like the baseline for like middle of the road reels, right? Like a Shimano Corrado is kind of like that, oh, okay, this is a $200 reel that can pretty much do anything at a certain price point, where I think this reel, the Megajaws Elite, kind of comes in at a very similar spot. You know, it can do a little bit of everything because it does have a light enough spool where you can throw some lighter lures, but it is tough enough that you can do some punching, flipping, stuff like that, especially with the flip and switch. And I think the Megajaws Elite kind of fills that void, but it's only, you know, you can get this for around $100 on sale. So curious what the community thinks about KastKing as a whole. I think they've made a lot of strides in the right direction, but I understand if, you know, it's not for everyone, but that's kind of my 2 cents on it. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Check out any of these reels. I'll have all the links down in the description, including some of the ones that we even mentioned on the side. So I'll see you guys next time.